Dipping glass. I've had several people ask me about dipping glass. They've been trying it and it's not been working for them. In my video series of talking about Future, I showed the dipping, and I've had a number of people ask me to just demonstrate it in more detail, I guess, and enough people who weren't doing a video for sure. Nothing takes away from a shiny build more than a windshield that's not up to the same shine or more. And it allows you to use just about any glue except for model cement to attach the glass. I also use it for all the headlights, all the tail lights and things like that as well. It allows you to use even super glue without damaging. There's so many benefits to it. I do it to every build, and if you look at any of my past builds, the glass is always very clean and crisp and almost crystalline. It's pretty simple. You just take some Future and you fill up a container big enough to dip your glass in, whatever you're dipping. I go ahead and do all the glass at the same time. And then you're going to need a paper towel. I just double over a piece usually, and I'll tape it down just to keep it from being all wavy. And then you take your whatever your piece may be, and in most cases on a kit you can grip it in an area where it's not going to be visible and when it's installed, so it doesn't leave a little blemish where you've been holding it. And you'll dip your part, swish it around, take it out, and in this case I would lay it like that because the rim is touching, and that will soak the excess off. And then after a couple minutes I will move it to a dry spot on the towel, and then the most important thing is to cover it. Leave it for at least half a day or overnight. The longer the better. If something were to go wrong, say you had a run in it or it just didn't come out good, you can take the dried windshield and put it back in some Future and leave it, because Future will dissolve Future. Leave it in there long enough for it to dissolve, take it back out and try again. Now I'm going to actually demonstrate a piece of kit glass. In this case I'm doing this piece on the my Tamiya F1 car. When you do clean up your glass and polish it and everything, if it's a little hazy, it doesn't matter. When you Future it, it's going to turn it clear. So it hides, those spots very well. The other key is when you do sand and buff your glass, you're going to have dust all over it. It's going to be very important that everything is super clean in this process. So you're going to want to wash it in soapy water, rinse it off really good. Alright, I've got my piece cleaned up. I washed it off. I had a couple little things happen in the process because this piece is so thin and fragile. My little sprue point that I was going to try to save to hold it, as I was sanding and working on this, it just kind of broke right off, and it took just the most minute amount of plastic with it. It's barely noticeable, but it is noticeable. So I ended up having to sand that little area, kind of clean it up, and it's become somewhat opaque. And I also accidentally, and hope I can show this, if you can see on that corner down there or close to the end, that little blemished area, that's where I accidentally hit with my sanding stick. That's okay, that's going to go away. So I'm not going to worry too much, because what I'll do is when I put this in the Future, just grab it, and when I drop it in my Future, I'm going to drop it upside down. That way I can grab it just about anywhere and lay it over this way onto the towel, and anywhere that I've grabbed it is going to run and cover. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to get my Future and obviously fill up enough to cover the part. So it doesn't really matter. I've got a funnel back there to put it back in with, because you don't want to leave your Future sitting out for too long either. It can pick up dust and particles. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in there, and I'm going to just move it around a bit to make sure there's no air bubbles trapped anywhere. Okay, you don't have to leave it for a long time. You don't have to, shake it or anything. I mean, once it's on there, it's on there. So I'll go ahead and grab it. I'm doing this very carefully. These are just some smooth jaw tweezers. And I'm gonna, tell you what, just grab it like that. In fact, let me do it one more time. Now, one thing to pay attention to is that you will have some bubbles in your future. When you pull it out, make sure it doesn't pull a bubble with it. If it does, just dip it back down and kind of maneuver it around. Let it drip off a little bit. You know, whatever excess is going to drip. And then set it on your towel. Okay. Immediately, okay, let me and then just check it over, make sure you don't have any bubbles in it anywhere. Okay, and then cover it up. Let it sit for just about a minute or two. It doesn't take long for the excess to run off and soak into the towel. Alright, and then what I'll do is I'll just kind of prod it somewhere into a dry spot of the towel, and at this point you don't have to worry about the paper towel sticking to it, because what it'll do, if you still do have some drip areas, they'll harden kind of the paper towel, and when it comes off it won't pull hair or it won't pull fibers off. When I go to attach this, I've got a number of options. You know, I can use epoxy. I wouldn't do that in this case because the seam is very obvious. I'm going to have an invisible seam where it attaches to the body. I could use clear enamel, although it's yellow looking in here. What you can do is brush a very thin film along the edge, let it sit for probably 15-20 minutes to where it gets real tacky. But you got to be really careful that you put it in place and not have to move it. But that works great if you have an enamel finish, especially. You can use super glue. Again, you have to be really careful that when you position the part, being something like this, that I position it one time and it's there, you know, and not having to move it. What I'm going to really end up doing is I'm going to use my Future Glue. Works great and it dries crystal clear. And again, it's like the enamel. You'll take a very thin film and put it around I'll put it around that edge that attaches, and let it, you know, just make sure you got a very thin film, get it positioned, and then let it sit. And this is pretty simply made. You just take Future, put it in a bottle, you know, fill it up, and just set it out somewhere. And what it'll happen is it'll eventually just evaporate, and then it'll turn into this glue. But it's like honey, basically. It's crystal clear honey. And of course you would just need a very minute amount and just barely run a very thin film around the part, or put a drop in like where your headlamp is going, your tail lamp or whatever, and it works great. If the stuff starts to get too thick on you, you can just add more Future. The stuff never really hardens as long as it's got a lid on it. And this bottle this is 3 years, I'd say about, yeah, I started this 3 years ago. I haven't added anything. It just sits with its lid on. And you know, obviously different parts are going to be a little different. You just have to think about how you're going to put it on the towel. In some cases, you could take the whole sprue. For instance, on these side windows, there's really nowhere where I can set the window and just leave it on a towel without laying it on the towel. So I would probably just trim the sprue down, the whole sprue, and then dab paper towel on it to get the excess off, and then just, you know, have it on one of those alligator sticks, and maybe just kind of cover it over with something to keep the dust from attracting to it. But you know, you just have to plan ahead to how you're going to hold your glass or how you're going to leave it on the towel. The towel dripping part is important, the wicking of the excess. And even if it leaves just a tiny bit a little bit thicker on a spot than others, you can't tell. You really can't tell. Further questions about it, you know, ask away. I will try to, you know, answer those questions, or maybe show something more or whatever. that's pretty much dipping glass with Future.